The one on Cortez?
We're on?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
We are on.
Good afternoon. This is the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, January 25th. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Amirian,
Here.
Commissioner Mardian,
Here.
Commissioner Morgan,
Here.
Commissioner Scher,
Here.
and Commissioner Vidor.
Here.
Next item.
The first order of business, we have 3 new commissioners today, and we don't have an incoming chair of the commission, so we need the commission to vote on a new chair with a motion and a second and then a vote.
Can I make the motion? Based on the previous policy and past commission policy, I nominate Mr. Amirian.
And I'll second the motion.
And we need a roll call
Roll call,
vote.
please.
Commissioner Amirian,
Can I vote on this or?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Scher,
Yes.
and Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
Motion passes. Now we
We pass the gavel.
Do we change our chairs as well or just?
Front and center.
This commission will all review.
Before we go to item number 3, I would like to welcome our 3 new members. Mr. Mardian and I, no, I have already changed it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We have
Need to change your names.
Yes.
the name as well, all right.
Okay.
We have served in the commission, and I would like to welcome each one of you, and I am looking forward for a long and productive collaboration in serving the city.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Tuesday, January 19, 2010, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any comments?
Mr. Chair, before you go to approval minutes, the introduction of the new commissioners.
Well, we can do that in oral communications.
Okay.
Thanks.
I would appreciate if you do that in oral communication.
I'll be happy to. As well, go ahead with the minutes, and then we'll...
Yes, okay. Any comments on the minutes?
Yeah, correction, I believe on page 1, number 3, approval of minutes on the vote absent, I believe should be Langren.
You're correct. We'll change that.
Okay.
And then minor, comment on page 5, 7B, in the paragraph, Hillcroft should be without an S.
Correct. And any
Any other
other?
comments?
No comments.
Okay, in this case, because we have 3 new commissioners, we'll only have the commissioners who were present at that meeting vote to approve the minutes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Can I second it?
I think you have to.
Okay, I second that. All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan,
I abstain.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Scher,
Abstain.
Commissioner Vidor,
Abstain.
and Chair Amirian.
Yes. Stop whenever it's time.
And unless the... Well, I guess before we go to public oral communications, we'll have a little introduction for our new commissioners.
Yes.
I'll start to my left, to the audience's right, with Commissioner Mike Morgan. And to his right, to his left, your right, is Commissioner Desiree Shire. And at the far end of the dais, Commissioner Arlene Vidor. And I'm sure they'd like to have a welcoming moment to say something to the audience.
Well, I just think I'm Mike Morgan, and I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful to be able to serve the city of Glendale and their people, and I'm honored to be in the Historic Preservation Commission.
You have Desiree Shire, and I also feel honored to be part of this commission. At the last meeting, I sat in your seat in the audience as our house was being approved and added to the Glendale Register of Historic Places or Resources. So that's an honor for me and a pleasure to serve.
My name is Arlene Vidor, and I'm very honored and excited to be a member of this commission and looking forward not only to working with this august group, but also to learning a lot of new things and hopefully making a contribution to the city of Glendale. Thank you.
Great. Welcome.
All right. Item number 5, oral communications. Everybody can speak, one at a time, of course, for 5 minutes, not related to the agenda items. And I have a series of cards, but they are all related to the projects. So, having seen no one to want to speak, we move to old business. Do we have anything in old business?
We have no old business. We should note, if anyone's in the audience who's going to speak and hasn't filled out a speaker card, we need you to do that, and they're on the counter behind me.
All right. 7, new business, Alex Theater.
Okay, I will introduce, we have a project team, many colleagues from city staff and from the Alex Theater, and we're going to let them present to you the project, the exciting project for the new forecourt renovations that are proposed for the theater. So to introduce the team and begin the presentation, we have Erica Garibian from the Development Services team.
All right.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. I'm Erica Garibian, representing Community Redevelopment and Housing, who owns and oversees the Alex Theater. In February 2009, the agency authorized staff to proceed with the Alex Theater forecourt redesign project. This project is among the many capital projects approved by the agency in April 2007, addressing the facility maintenance and capital improvement needs prior to the expiration of the Central Glendale project area in 2015. Since the initial rehabilitation almost 15 years ago, there has not been a capital project to maintain or enhance the building system and overall condition. In order to put the building in the best possible condition, the building committee, theater staff, and redevelopment staff have worked together to compile a comprehensive list of long-term maintenance and capital projects for the Alex Theater. Before I turn it over to Mr. Barry McComb, Executive Director and CEO of Glendale Arts, to go over the scope and project goals, I would like to add that the Alex Theater is a community asset, and we appreciate its importance and the value it adds in enriching our overall community. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, rather, and members of the Commission. I'm Barry McComb. I'm the CEO of Glendale Arts, which is the private nonprofit that's contracted with the city to manage the operations and oversee the programming at the Alex Theater. As you may or may not be aware, in 2015, we will lose the financial support that we currently receive from the redevelopment agency when the downtown redevelopment district expires. And as part of that pending deadline, we've begun a process of looking at all various operations of the theater to identify new sources of income, be sure that we're maximizing the use of space to prepare for that loss so that hopefully we can become self-sustainable by that deadline. One of the things that we've been doing is to explore how we can better maximize the use of what limited space we do have there. And as part of that process, we've kind of focused on the forecourt. Obviously, our forecourt is one of the unique features that sets the Alex Theater apart from any other venue that's in Los Angeles, with probably the only exception being the Egyptian Theater, which also has a similar forecourt. After 17 years of use, the space is beginning to show wear and tear, and I know a few of you, hopefully all of you, had a chance to stop by and tour the forecourt over the weekend, and I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's seen better times at this moment. So, knowing that we had to do some refurbishment, we decided that it also presented us with an opportunity to try to enhance the space so that it was more flexible in the types of activities that could take place, such as weddings, receptions, and also small performances out in the forecourt. So as we began the project, we established two goals for ourselves. The first was to create a space that was complementary to the architecture of the Alex Theater without creating a false sense of history. That was very important to us. To also increase the flexibility of the space so that it could be utilized for a wider variety of purposes. With those goals in mind, we set up a variety of different criteria that we wanted to see incorporated into the project. The first was a retractable sunshade to go over the top. One of the issues that we have is, particularly in the summer months, when the sun's out, that forecourt is pretty much unusable from late morning till almost sunset because it gets so hot in there, and that certainly has prevented us from doing a variety of activities. We also, for the winter months, are looking to incorporate radiant electric heaters so that on evenings like last Saturday, while it's not raining outside, it was rather chilly, and that forces our patrons inside the lobby areas, which, of course, don't have the space that the forecourt does. We're also looking to enhance the environmental lighting to showcase the front facade of the theater, as well as to provide better lighting when we have events that have, like, silent auction tables that are set up out in the forecourt. We're also looking to incorporate a sound curtain, which should be retractable and will go across the front gates to black out street noise so that we can do small cabaret-style performances for 100, 150 people in the forecourt, which now would be impossible because of the amount of street noise that we have coming in. We also wanted to provide more seating options for patrons to be able to sit while waiting to enter the theater. I think the bench system that they've created certainly addresses that. We also wanted to bring back a decorative water feature, but also did not want to try to replicate the original water feature that used to be on the north side of the forecourt. So as you'll see, we've come up with a water wall that will live on the south side. We also felt there was an opportunity for us to add an additional window as part of our box office, which would be just inside the gates. It would also be ADA compliant. We don't currently have an ADA compliant window, so not only will it provide us with an extra window to service customers when shows are taking place, but also to better meet the needs of our patrons. We also are looking at new and more effective solutions for concessions. Actually, two that we're looking at right now. One is to go to a cart system where we can actually service off both sides of the cart, and we're also looking at converting a small space that's in the lobby, currently used for merchandise, possibly into a concession area as well. So we're still exploring both of those and looking at health department regulations, etc., to make sure that we will be in compliance. This new design will also provide us with an opportunity for donor walls, which of course creates a fundraising mechanism for us. And one of the key components to those walls is we want to be sure that it's very affordable. We're looking at possibly $200 a name so that it's very accessible for any member of the community really to be able to support the theater and have their name added showing their support in the forecourt area. We're also looking to improve the access to utilities, access to power, audiovisual hookups to reach the PA system that will be installed. And finally, the other key was creating an environment with low maintenance plantings. Certainly we have the palm trees now. You'd think they might be low maintenance, but they're not. We've continually had problems with the trees along the north side of the forecourt dying. So we've spent thousands of dollars over the last few years replacing them. We've had the Parks Department's landscape folks come out and take a look. They've done soil test samples, and really we can't figure out exactly why that's been happening, but we suspect it's because with all the cement that the roots are cooking because of the intense heat that's radiated there. So we believe that the Architectural Resources Group has successfully addressed all those requirements with their design, and we believe the design will be complementary to the architectural styles of the Marquis and the theater, serving as kind of a bridge between those two unique styles themselves. At the conclusion of our presentation today, I'll be available for questions that you might have, as well as Jack Calloway, who is the manager of the theater. And with that, I'll turn our presentation over to Christopher Smith of ARG.
Thank you. Christopher, did you want to control the slides? Just like that. I'll figure it out.
Good afternoon, Commission. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here today, and congratulations to the new commissioners that are coming on today. I think this is a really exciting project to get your feet wet on this commission, because it's very dynamic. I think we have established a wonderful team, and we're all enjoying working together and think the outcome is going to be fantastic. Our firm, Architectural Resources Group, is headquartered in San Francisco. Our office is located in Old Pasadena. We've been in business for 30 years, specializing in historic preservation from architecture, planning, and materials conservation. So we're kind of a full-service preservation firm all under one roof. Our philosophy for the Alex Theater is rooted in the belief of a continued use of a resource that is truly an interplay of the old and the new. It's already a beloved landmark, and it reflects two critical periods, both of them being treated as historic. The 1920s historic theater towards the rear of the property, and the 1940s Art Deco or modern tower marquee in the front facing Brand Boulevard. While the entry marquee and the theater have been well maintained, the forecourt has sort of lost its grandeur, to kind of say it nicely. It needs some help, and hopefully by the end of this project it will be helped out greatly. The Alex Theater Forecourt project, it affords a wonderful opportunity to design a solution to return the forecourt to the grandeur of the earlier days. Our design approach for this project is primarily in three goals. Number one is to recapture the magic of the Alex Theater forecourt. The arrival sequence was an important aspect of historic theater design, whether it was through an exterior forecourt similar to what we have here, or a traditional vestibule and lobby, which the theater now has. The entry sequence was typically designed to transport that patron out of their everyday lives and into this sort of fantasy world. And the Alex is sort of an eclectic mix of this fantasy world. The theater is primarily an Egyptian motif, but it certainly brings in other eclectic styles. And when the tower marquee was built in the 40s, it was really meant to really put that boom out there on Brand Boulevard and capture that patron. Although the Alex Theater forecourt has changed over the years, it's clear from historic photographs that we've researched that it was always a significant element of the Alex Theater itself. Although early on,
Just hit the button on the side, on the right side. Or if you want to take this. Should have done that first.
forgive me. Here's an early view, 1920s view, and you can see there's actually a commercial building that was lining the front, street frontage, and all the way back to the theater with the forecourt towards the left. The Alex Theater is currently devoid of any character that would enhance the patron's arrival experience once you get past that grand entry marquee. And our design seeks to reestablish it within the design of the complex as a whole, without copying either the original design or its Greek-Egyptian motifs, or the 1940s tower marquee and tower. So we also want to draw upon that rich palette that's out there. There's a great color palette out there. This is an early photograph of the forecourt. You can see there is actually Greek motif elements to the north wall of the Alex forecourt. So we're looking to really pick up all sort of motifs in this general philosophy, but certainly come away not questioning what is historic and what's not. I think that's a primary goal of the project. Our second primary goal is to transform the existing forecourt into a place to be rather than a space to travel through. It must be an essential part of the theater experience, both as a pre-function intermission and post-functioning space. It needs to be comfortable, a comfortable place to gather, and easy access to food and service amenities. Our third goal, create a design that has the flexibility to also function as a multi-use or reception area. Much of the infrastructure will be involved around providing technical capabilities for a variety of functions, adequate electrical and in multiple locations, audio-visual flexibility, access to food service and storage, as well as appropriate lighting for both daytime and nighttime events. And this is a 1940s era photograph, which really shows you how the grandeur really brought you in off Brand Boulevard and into the forecourt. As we've kind of gone through the process in our design to date, Amy Korn, our landscape architect, and I, once we immediately entered it, we felt that the space being sloped as it was from the entry marquee all the way up to the theater was sort of causing you to be unbalanced, if you will. And we felt that there was much more opportunity to have a more balanced and comfortable gathering space that you can use the forecourt on its own. It's a standalone element within the Alex Theater complex. And by that, we're sort of calling it now a room within a room. And with that, a lot of our design elements are kind of coming around with that philosophy in mind. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Amy Korn from Korn Randolph.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Korn with Korn Randolph Landscape Architects, and I'm very happy to be speaking in front of you today. And I'm looking forward to walking you through the site plan. Actually, before I do that, Christopher just mentioned a little bit about today's conditions. And when we visited the site near to a year ago, it was sort of our intuitive impression, and we even visited in the evenings, that people were using that site because of the ramp. There's actually a 3-foot grade change. Let's see if I can. From the lobby entrance, which we can see here on the image, or on our site plan, to the elevation of the theater. And that's broken up currently, where that fellow is standing in the image on screen, is the center. That has a pretty good pitch to it, thank you, as well. Let's point to that here. This has a pretty good pitch to it. It's about 3%. And then from the lobby to the center is about 3.5%. And then again, from the center to the theater is another 3.5%. So you have this huge ramp, and I've watched people move through it in the center like it's a big aisle. And then they hang around on the peripheral with concessions or waiting for someone to arrive without really a nice enhanced view or a direct view of the theater or a sense of where to be and how to enjoy it at an intermission or before. So with those impressions, it was kind of just our intuition that we should really just turn that on its head, which then became the concept of room within a room. And what I'll be walking you through here, and I'll bring it up here on screen as well, either or. Here on the west is the lobby. It's better to point here. The lobby entrance, and then we have the theater on the east. The walls, the forecourt walls, are existing and to remain. These columns exist there now. What we're doing with this room within a room concept is we've come away from these existing walls about 7-8 feet on each side, and then have low seat walls on the inside of that. Now, to skip to materials a little bit, and actually maybe jumping around a bit here, but we have a materials board. Some of the existing color palette that we see at the Alex now is evident in the terrazzo paving, which kind of reaches back a little bit to the deco, our modern lobby entrance. And then we have the Grecian Egyptian theater, which also has a terrazzo envelope underneath it that's existing. These are our boundary edges, in a sense, here and here. What we're suggesting in the new design is bringing in some of that color scheme that we can see at the Alex. So some of those turquoise, the butter tones, the creams, without overdoing it. I don't think we want to bring in and try to replicate what's there, but we want to enhance and embrace both architectural styles in the center and give that center room a purpose. And what we feel this brings to the Alex forecourt is when you arrive in the space, you have a nice envelope at the lobby entrance. You can see here, this is the expansion of the existing box office on the inside. So you come through the gates. There's an ADA accessible ticket window here. And we're looking at the sound curtain being in this location. And this is an electrical room which will remain and also remain for some storage as well. This envelope is about 12 feet deep, and what we've done with this 3-foot grade change, we want to make sure that this is universally accessible to everybody equally coming to visit. We do have steps in this design, however, we're minimizing it to 2, which eliminates the need for a handrail. There are 2 steps here, so it's a 1-foot grade change to our interior room. Then we have another 2 steps, but again, a nice envelope to pause, to meet someone if you're coming out of the theater before proceeding down. The other options of circulation, let me jump back. So that there is a 2-foot difference in grade. We have a bit of a pitch here below needing a ramp, very, very subtle, and a pitch here to pick up the other 6 inches on either side. Now, if you're coming and you are in a wheelchair or in a walker and you do not want to use the stairs, your options are here. There is an ADA accessible ramp with handrail in this location on this side. However, on the south, there is no handrail. It's just an accessible ramp. So you have this ability. And the other thing that this does for us with this room within a room, if we are having more of a private opportunity for an event or party, people can still go into the theater on the ramps around it. And you can still have two ways to circulate through the space, or you can come through the center. Now, these walls that we're looking at here are seat walls. I'm going to flip here since this is on screen. I apologize for that. So here are the seat walls that we have that embrace the room within a room. And they are about 1.5 feet in height, comfortable to sit on. And at each of these points, you can see on each side there are 4 circles. And what those are, and I'll show you in an elevation, are Grecian urns. Again, Christopher showed you one of the historical photos with those urns. So again, we're reaching back to that. Here are some of the suggestions and materials that we may use for color of the urns. Could go more traditional, like a bronze, like we've seen before, or be a little bit more lively and fun. We're still considering all these options, and pick up on the butters or the turquoise that exist in the most urn, and again, marrying those 2 styles together. But what they do, and I know that there is interest in plant material as well, is those urns.
I'm sorry, but you're going to have to speak into the mic so it can be captured on. So when you wander away, we lose you on the record.
So what those urns will contain in concept here are large but thin cypress, some of the varieties that don't overgrow. And we're talking about a shape such as this. And again, those locations are 4 on each side. And we think they also enhance the idea of the vertical columns at the Egyptian Grecian entrance to the theater. The columns that exist there now, quite nice and very pronounced. They have a great sense about them. So we've actually made a decision in this concept to keep the seat walls just outside of those columns, large enough for a nice size usable space, and also to accentuate and kind of express the magnitude of the columns, but not with hard material, with green material. So we're not trying to take away from the architectural structure of that. And we have some elevations here that also describe what we're looking at. This is the elevation of the south wall. We are proposing a water feature in the center. This is the existing column. So here we have the theater and the lobby and sound curtain at the entrance. You can get a sense of the grade change now. You can see the 2 steps, then coming into this forecourt room. Another thing that I did not add is at the center of the forecourt, there's an opportunity to step into the space from the ramp. So you don't have to enter from the top and the bottom. You're welcome to come in on axis which really presents the fountain on one side and Marquis panels on the north. So again, usable to everybody coming in at any opportunity and keeping that room open from all sides. Other things that we can see here in this elevation are Marquis donor panels that were mentioned before by Barry. These can also be panels that maybe show things that have happened in the Alex's history. They could be interchangeable, perhaps behind glass, but maybe etched in that glass would be names of donors that can be added to the front, but we can see something of drama or sense of current events or what's happened before. And that would take place on both sides. On the other side, the north side, there would be a large panel here in lieu of the fountain. Here's the elevation of the theater. And again, in this elevation, we can get a sense of the vertical green that is complementary of the columns. And again, something absent from the space now, it directs views and really enhances the theater elevation as well as the elevation of the lobby entrance. Here's a perspective sketch of what we think this forecourt will look like once built. Some of it is a work in progress with the artist still, so actually it's a bit easy to see what's being proposed. Everything in white that doesn't have color inside of it is the addition within the space. So again, here we're looking at existing walls, the addition of these columns, which replicate the columns that are closest to the theater elevation now, and here as well. The interior seat walls, we're actually suggesting that the material of these seat walls may have a scallop-type face to them, which reflects some of the scalloping on the Art Deco lobby entrance columns, as well as the theater columns. So again, a marriage of some of that design vocabulary. And we can see here that people can move through and even gather. There's enough room in these ramps on the side for people to gather comfortably. We have this nice welcoming carpet here. 2 steps up and you're in the forecourt room. And you can pause and feel like you have a sense of place and a place to celebrate the Alex. And with that, I think I can turn it over to questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Any questions from me? Do you have questions? Oh,
Excuse me, there's one thing that I forgot to mention that was mentioned by Barry that's an element in the design, and it is pretty important. We are considering the use of a shade canopy. And something interesting about this, you can't quite see it that well in this sketch. You can see the wires that are going across from north to south. And actually in one of our elevations here, very faintly, but I'm going to try and point to them now, you can see vertical lines that are hanging down, and they actually hang down at different heights. We're actually orienting panels east and west so that we can keep views of the Alex Theater open. They can be drawn to the north and south to keep them open to the sky, but at the same time let some light through, but not block this elevation here as if we were to do an umbrella-like canopy.
So they would be hung, a series of hung fabric that would run east-west, as Amy mentioned, and would be sort of a translucent material that would provide enough shade, but also give you enough visibility through it. It would be on an operable pulley system that we think would be very functional and easy to operate for the users, with fairly low maintenance. And also, we would do a thin cabling system to make it as transparent as possible. I know the Alex Theater does have the idea of having this as a potential film location, so we do want that to go away. It would be attached along the outer walls with a series of ornamental brackets or corbels or some sort of decorative motif that would provide a ledger along and sort of give you an artificial ceiling height within the space.
And one thing on top of that about plant material, I spoke of cypress in an architectural fashion to enhance columns, but we're also considering, and this was something I did not share with you, but on both sides, on the north and south walls, in some of the existing historic photos, certainly on the north wall, you can see planting was used in pots and low planting where the fountain was. Now we have the fountain proposing it on the south side. Some of the plant material was such indoor-type plants as bladed plants as mother-in-law's tongue, some Dracaena, cordyline, very period planting. And I think it's really wonderful. Some of it may not survive so well, but what we've done is selected plant material, as you can see on this board. Flax, which is very similar to mother-in-law's tongue. It will take the heat, and there's some beautiful colors that we can use today that kind of reach to the architecture as well. Liriope is another consideration in the shade. And also we'd like to have planting that weeps out of the pots too as well, like we're seeing in this image here, to give it overall character and respect what was there, also be water-wise and considerate of water use in today's climate. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned carpet. Is that just a name for basically from the ticket booth to the first steps?
Yes, meaning a welcome area.
A welcome
so to
area.
speak.
Okay, not actual
Yeah,
material.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yes.
No artificial turf.
Yeah.
Any other?
A question. I have a couple questions. One, I'm interested in the two stairs. I think that's great that you're leveling out the forecourt, and you're going to have two stairs in the front, and then they will tie in, obviously, with the two stairs in the back, creating some kind of a continuity there for the front of the forecourt and the back of the forecourt. So what did you envision as the riser design, and so that it's bold enough to be interesting, but not so bold that it looks busy?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that we're still developing, working drawings for this project. And actually, the materials board here, you can take a look at the bottom, are samples of possible concrete. Some are a little bit more celebratory of what's there now than others. But I think the main thing is that they are noticeable. They're not overdone. And I think we're talking about color and texture within this range, but that the riser be bright enough that we can see it and scored appropriately so there's no slipping, but it announces itself as well. So those are things that we'll consider, and I thank you for the question.
Okay.
I believe you were asking the height of the risers. Yeah?
Well, no, I wasn't. That's obviously another good question, but I was thinking of how bold they would be, because it's such a wonderful opportunity to tie the front and the back of the court together so that there's total continuity of the whole project. So it's a good question. So are they steep, or what is the depth of the riser?
The riser height, because it is a 3-foot grade change, we were able to work this out to keep the ramps as low as possible, too. We did not want to make them too high. They will be sort of the standard height of a 6-inch riser. However, the width will be wider. So it's 6 inches tall and at least 18 inches of a tread width.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have
You do?
some more questions. I was focusing while you were both talking on the tie-in of the front, the fabulous entrance of the Alex and the entrance to the theater, and searching for signs of tying the whole thing together, so that although you are creating a unique space, there is some, repetition of themes or something recalling something else. And I was wondering if you were going to recall anything in the design, either of the detailing or the architecture itself, of some of the front. Like, for instance, one thing that I find always eye-catching is this element of the tower, Charles Lee's tower, and could you perchance use plantings or decorative elements to recall that? And, where are you going to recall the front into the forecourt?
Thank you. And I think that the paving, going to our site plan for a moment, we've shown the center of this room. There's the idea that there would be a carpet, again, using that term as a metaphor, but in concrete, that there's this center panel here that really ties some of these elements together. Perhaps something like that detail takes place in the flat panel of that design as well. We're still studying that area, so it's still an opportunity to consider this. In one other sense that may not be so visible in the site plan, as sorry, I'm flipping back here. It may be challenging for us to see, but this detail here of the seat wall, and here we can see it here. This isn't the exact direction we're planning on going, but there's a product called Form Liner, can be developed in different ways. We're thinking of picking up on the scallop, again, that scallop that we see in the modern and Deco lobby, the large chunks we see come out of that, as well as here, the column has a similar scallop, different scale. So that seat wall is an opportunity architecturally to bring both together into the center. And that's something that I think could be a strength in that area.
Okay.
So also, if I can hop on that too, the sort of fluting motif that would be along the seat wall also recalls, if you remember from being out at the site, underneath the existing ticket window there is a band of that fluting edge is sort of a base along that, and I think that actually would tie into the seat walls as well.
Okay.
Any questions you have?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Chair. What are the size of those Italian cypress that you're thinking of? I mean, is it 7-8 feet during?
They would be a little bit taller, full-grown. I think that realistically they're going to go in as a 24-inch box-sized tree in this pot. It will not be the species just Italian cypress. It will be stricta. It's a variety. It's a little bit more gray-blue. It's a little bit narrower, and it stays quite more compact in a pot. And actually, that's what we're showing here. This is planted in Pasadena at a commercial building. They've survived here very well for 8 years now, maybe 5 to 8 years. They stay much narrower, but I think the ultimate height within the pot also has been selected of a size that will support and be in keeping of the character and scale. But we're talking about a 12 to 15 foot cypress, which here is expressed in the elevation to that scale, which is what you're looking at.
So it's almost to the columns.
Yeah, right. A bit shy of the columns, more so to the existing forecourt walls on the north and south sides.
One main question that I had, I just don't want to create a false elements. I know you're trying to mimic the other side with the
Mr.
column.
Mardian, if that's a
Okay,
comment,
well, I'll wait for that.
it should be
My
between,
last question, have you had any other ways of putting these cypresses, like on natural ground? I mean, more of a planter versus a pot because of the life?
We have not considered that because I think the size of the pot that we have designed, which is actually a custom size to support it, it feels a little bit more of an architectural presence being integrated as part of these seat walls, which is why we've placed them as such. Instead of having a green column right in your face that you would walk up to, it's lifted a little bit higher. There's a little more drama to that. That's the consideration in the design.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
that's it?
One more question, and it just,
Okay.
sorry.
Oh, okay. Let us kind of do the questioning and, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to understand if I understood you all correctly, that the idea of the forecourt now is to have potentially events going on in the court within that room within a room, and at the same time, people would be going in and out of the theater for another event, so that you would have a specific private event simultaneous with, because that might affect the way you look at how you design this.
Right. What happens many times now is we'll have events that want to do a pre-event reception.
Okay.
And the way that we typically have to do that is if it is in the forecourt is closed to the general public until that event's over, and about 30 minutes before the show we open it up for
So
anybody
you'd
to
never
come
have
through.
two non-related events at the same time?
Yes,
Would
yes.
be, okay.
They would be tied in together.
Got it.
One idea that we've talked about as well is on the benches that are coming up either side is much almost like a stanchion, but we would have like a soft fabric wall, wouldn't be more than maybe 2 or 3 feet tall, to create a little bit more of a barrier so that someone could be doing a pre-show reception for some of their sponsors of an event, but still allow the public to come up the side to gain access to the theater, which instead of making the promoter end the reception a half an hour before, it could really go up till 45 minutes, 10 minutes before the performance starts.
Thank you.
All right, now, I have one more question, then the questioning will end, and we'll ask Larry to speak, then we'll deliberate. And my question is this. On your presentation, Amy, you said that one of the reasons, or I believe you said the only reason of having two sets of stairs is to eliminate the possibility of railings. Is that the only reason?
No, it's not the only reason.
What is the other
I'm sorry
reason?
if I misrepresented that. There is such a grade change across the site that it makes sense to have it all at one level, then orients it only to one of the two wonderful bookends that we have. By splitting the difference in the center, it's a nice pause and experience. It also allows us to have these wonderful features at each side appreciated to come in on center from the ramp. So there's more than one reason, though it does address that, certainly.
That's all I wanted to
Yes,
know.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have another card, Mr. Larry Tyson. Thank you very much. Very nice presentation.
Very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Amirian and Commissioners, new and old. My name is Larry Tyson. I'm a landscape architect and also a member of the Glendale Historical Society. I actually came down here on another issue, but when I saw what they were presenting today, I just had to get up and put my 2 cents worth in. I was talking to Ms. Corn, the landscape architect, earlier, and I think this is a great improvement. This is a very elegant, well thought out design. I really liked her plant palette, and I think one of the problems with the space as it exists now is that you're compressed into the opening when you first come in off of Brand. Then the space becomes very vertical. And I think the plantings, those tall fan palms, are actually contributing to this sense of verticalness. So I like the idea of her putting the small, lower-growing cypress in the pots, and that it introduces a human scale to the space. And I think she hit the nail on the head with both her and the architect on the elevation change. It does make a very unusual space when you're trying to stand there and you're very unsure of yourself. So I think they've identified the problems of the space. I like the solutions. The designated space functions are nice. But I think there still needs to be a little more work on the exact design elements and I guess the final paving. One of the problems I have with the paving as they presented it, I like what they're developing with the elevation changes in these two spaces. The problem I have is the checkerboard in the middle. I think this is a little too longitudinal or too long for the space. It's going to make the space have a tendency to look maybe too narrow on approach from both ends. Maybe they could do something more across the space that way. But other than that, I think it's a great design, and it's mostly there, and I hope you guys approve and they refine it a little more. Other than that, those are my comments.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I would like to, before you go into your deliberation, just cover a couple of issues based on the staff recommendations and the purview of the Commission, not just in this situation, but in general. Going to the purview first, the Commission is not only looking at the historic aspects of this project in terms of how it possibly could affect the Glendale Register and National Register listing of the Alex Theater, but you're also looking at design considerations, much in the way that the Design Review Board is looking at design issues on their projects that they review. So because the Historic Preservation Commission has binding review authority, you're the final design review authority for this kind of project. So you need to keep that in mind as you're deliberating, coming to your kind of group consensus on where you want to go and how you're going to vote. Remember that these issues, I'll be asking you specifically which issues you're approving, and hopefully you'll be able to formulate a list of your ideas here of what you're ready to approve, what you need more information about. Which brings us to the second point, which is that you've heard that some of the design aspects of this project haven't completely been finalized. The project also hasn't been reviewed by the Fire Department and Building and Safety, so there may be further kind of alterations or changes based on their input. What I think is really important here for Barry and the people at the theater, they have to keep the theater dark for 2 months while this project is going, and they've already blocked out that time. So they really need to get a very strong sense of direction from you today. And then what I need from you is an idea of some of the minor details, I hope you'll be able to delegate to me as the staff person for the commission, so that we can make sure that they meet the goals of the project, the goals that you guys have established in your thoughts, and then also the Secretary of the Interior standards. If there is anything that you're less comfortable about, that you think you may want to have brought back to the commission, we'll have to pull that out specifically and let the staff of the theater know, so that they can plan ahead, so that they could come back to the commission at a future meeting. But certainly things like the overall kind of hardscape work, the planters, the paving, the walkways and the ramps, I think they would need strong direction on today, so that they can actually start moving and start going into the construction drawing phase. So some thoughts for you during your deliberation.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, the public hearing period is concluded now. Who would like to start making comments?
Well, I have some, and
Okay, go ahead.
happy to make them unless someone else wants to go first.
We'll allow you.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. I think it's really nice. I like the idea and hope you will pursue strongly the tie-in of the front and the back, including use of some of the elements that are very specific to the front of the or what comes before the forecourt. I'm a little concerned when I look at this drawing because the schematics aren't very vivid. You know, they're in black and white or line drawings, and it's kind of hard to tell what you're looking at. About two things about the design. And one is that it is a small space to begin with, which is one of the reasons you're trying to optimize it. And what I didn't realize was that your seat walls are away from the wall. And I'm just wondering, proportionally and with the amount of square footage you have, if that design, especially with the various color elements you've included, is not going to be too busy. Having said that, that's not very specific recommendations to you, but I guess I would like to maybe simplify that interior concrete design a little bit and make it a little more subtle. And also, you have different points of egress into that room within a room. I realize that, but how big is that space actually going to be, and will it accommodate people, or should the seat walls be part of the natural perimeter of the forecourt? I don't know, but that's a question and a concern. I like the fact that you're leveling it out. I don't like the idea of using carts for service, and that may factor into what you do with the permanent elements of the forecourt. I've seen it at the Getty Center, I've seen it at the Disney Concert Hall, and it just cheapens these beautiful spaces to see carts. So if you were thinking of putting some kind of permanent or semi-permanent concession into the Alex to compensate for what's there now, I'd ask you to consider doing that rather than carts, like coffee cart type carts. The planters, I think, are nice and should stay simple with clean lines. I also like the fact that you are going with low plantings and that you're going to mix lush cascading plants with something vertical. Otherwise, you know, the vertical cypresses are beautiful, but they're almost like hardscape. They're so vertical. So, you know, so that, you know, you don't end up with something that looks all like hardscape. So keep the landscape with some softness to it. There was something else. The sunshades, I'm not quite sure I understand. I wish there was a little bit more of a photographic-looking rendering of those, just to see what it looked like, but you don't have that, so that's maybe something to follow up on. I think that's about it, and I have one more comment that you're not going to, Jay's probably going to, I'm alerting you that you're probably going to cut me off, but it has to do with the fact that you're doing this wonderful renovation, which is so pleasing to see. But yet the front kiosk that used to be the old box office is kind of sitting there and looking almost like a piece of urban blight. It's sort of neglected, and if there was some way along with this project to kind of do something with that so that it doesn't look so neglected, it just all this money and time being spent to improve the forecourt, it would be nice to have that front box office looking good. The only other question I have is how that second box office is going to look, and whether that is going to, there's no rendering that depicts the second box office.
Yeah, well, it's in one of the elevations. It's basically a continuation of the existing box offices. I've lost control.
But it has to go past the gate. So it's one continuous.
Another window at a lower level so that a person who's chair-bound could come up to the window, but the detailing will be similar.
But the detailing is the same, and it looks like the other box office.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for me.
I'll go next, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. I like the fact that you're creating this centralized space. At the beginning, I thought, why steps? I'm kind of against steps. But now, after site visit and all that, I feel you're kind of creating a central space, which I think will liven up this whole court. But I do have some concerns about the pattern in the central area. I think maybe some curvature should be added to it, maybe to reduce that long image. The fact that the existing the pavement or the terrazzo is kind of in a curved circular shape, maybe we'll break that down. I just hope these cypresses will survive. I'm only concerned with those, really. I like the choice of it. But I have I'm concerned why not in the natural grade versus pots and plants, because these are going to be hard to maintain, in my opinion. I think this renovation will create an inviting space. Those are my comments.
Okay, let me go back to Ms. Vidor. Do you want the project to come back to us after it develops further for detailing? Because we will be asking that later on. You might as well include it in your comments.
Well, my opinion is that based on the fact that I can't entirely visualize all the elements that are included in this redesign of the forecourt, which are wonderful but seem like a lot of elements, and how are they all going to work together? I guess I'd have to say I'd certainly like to see it, but if there's some way to expedite it, I don't want the Alex to be dark, so that's a tough question. I don't want to make it any more difficult logistically than it is, but this is a forever thing, so we want it to be
one thought, and at the end, after we hear all the comments, I'll kind of do a recap of each of the items discussed to see if there's consensus or not, and then you can develop kind of what your program is for voting. But I think the ultimate goal would be to get your potential approval for the kind of the broader concepts of the project, and then pull out some of the very specific things that are less clear, especially the sunshade and things like that, that you could then either discuss whether you want to defer to staff or bring that back to a future hearing.
Yeah, but at the same time, I like to hear that at the end of each one's comments.
Of course, yeah.
How about you, Mr. Mardian?
Yeah, I think they should look at the paving pattern in the central courtyard.
You want to see that? Okay.
I want to see that.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
I actually agree with Commissioner Mardian's comments about the floor pattern. I feel there's too many long, narrow elements, and I was really impressed with some of the organic shapes, whether in stenciling or in the terrazzo that exists today, and thinking some of those could really be mixed in. You've got such a geometric space now being created with some of the benches that it's almost a little too geometric for me personally, as I look at the beautiful facade of the Alex. It's got a lot of elements that aren't quite so stark and geometric. My second comment is on the shade structure. I'd like to see that as well. I'm wondering, when it's open, where is it stacking? What is that stacking dimension? How is that looking, and where does that kind of meet up with the structure? I know it's running east to west, but I don't know really at what end or in the middle. Where is that?
Question.
And then the third comment I have is on the box office, on the new box office. Right now, the space is very symmetrical, and I wondered if you considered mirroring the shape of the electrical room on the south with the new box office on the north, rather than making that very rectilinear. If there's one element that exists and the whole space is very symmetrical, that seems to me to be a little bit out of place, although it may present problems with a curved wall for the box office, so I'm not sure if that was considered. But yeah, I would love to see at least the redesign of the pattern. That's what bothers me most.
Okay, thank you.
I have to agree with the other commissioners as far as the design in the middle. It looks a little awkward to me. It would be nice if they could do something that ties in both sides of the theater itself. Having grown up in Glendale and having gone to the Alex when it was actually a theater, I have to agree with the fact of the magic of the forecourt. It was a very exciting thing to actually buy a ticket at the box office and walk up the forecourt to the actual theater where you were anticipating going to see the actual movie. So I would like to see something like that. The overall design I find fantastic. Anything that will increase the use of the forecourt for the Alex and for the Alex Theater, I think is appropriate. I'm not so much bothered by the cypress trees. I think they render a historic element to the Alex that was there back in the 20s. As far as the covering the sunshade, it would be nice to see exactly what the sunshade would kind of look like itself. I envision it as old Roman Colosseums had a sunshade, so this is kind of tying into that Greco-Roman theme, but without actually seeing how it's going to bunch at the end. I'm pretty sure it probably would be nice, but without having seen something, it's hard to make a determination on it itself.
Thank you very much. I believe it's my turn. I like the project in its totality. I think it's fantastic. It's going to the right direction. I like everything in it. The only thing that I question is whether I want to see two sets of stairs or one set of stairs. Just bringing it up to the level of theater. That's just a desire. But it will not change my vote. I do not have any problem with the design pattern on the floor. I think these long squares are kind of directing you and reflecting the form of the space. I just like it. All in all, I think it's a good improvement. I think you should proceed. Those details will not derail the project in any form or shape as far as I'm concerned. Those are minor details that we like to see for our own comfort level. But I think you should proceed. It looks good, and I congratulate the designers and the Alex group for doing this. Having said that,
just to wrap up what I'm hearing from you guys, it seems like the sunshade is definitely something you would like to look at again, to have more information. When the rendering's complete, that will probably be helpful, but we'll also ask to have more information about exactly where the shade's going when it's retracted, if it's in a box, if it's pulled against the wall, how that's going to look. Perhaps we'll try to get some sort of visualization so you can see it in both the open and the closed condition. In terms of the paving, I'm hearing from the majority of you that you'd like to see something a little different, but it doesn't sound like you're looking for something radically different, maybe the introduction of some curves into a geometric design like this of some sort. We did look at a variety just at staff level. There were many, many iterations that came through, some with more kind of motifs that recalled some of the design elements of the theater. It's very important to keep in mind that filming is one of the foremost concerns for the Alex or for Glendale Arts, and they're concerned that if there was anything that distinctly branded the forecourt, it would then not read as kind of any place USA that could be used for filming opportunities. I think, though, staying within some sort of geometric motif that works with the forecourt, obviously, that won't be an issue. I only heard about whether the front box office is more of that Commissioner Vidor mentioned, is more of an aesthetic issue of how that looks, and that could be some routine maintenance possibly. I'm not sure that anyone else was concerned about the balance of the new expanded box office compared to the electrical room configuration.
that the curvature you're talking about on the
Yeah,
bottom section?
but
Mr. Chair, is that the top box office?
the box office is on top and the
yeah.
electrical room is on the
Now,
bottom.
is that an existing condition right now? All we're doing is putting an opening in there?
No, you're actually
No, you are
extending
extending.
Extending it.
it back
We're
toward the
extending it.
theater.
I agree with the...
Well, it is already.
It actually...
No, but if it's extending, we could still treat it with that semi-curve there. The curve, it has a little curve.
You know, and we could certainly bring that up with
You know.
with the designers. I think there was concern about the usability of the space, but it looks like a fairly modest curve that wouldn't take
Yeah.
away too much space. So we could certainly see if the designers could work with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the carts, which is something that we, on a historic level, it's not really an issue because they're wheeled in and wheeled out. But one commissioner expressed concern about those. I'm not sure that anyone else.
I don't have any problem with that. It's an operational thing, and
Okay, so it sounds like you're ready to approve the project as a whole, with the exception of asking to review the paving design and then the sunshade structure sometime in the future.
If I may interject.
just 1 second, please. Yes, Mr. Mardian.
I noticed in the report you're adding also heaters, wall heaters? Or
Yeah, that's part of the plan, and that's also something that would
Is
come
that
back.
something going to interfere with the awning or the
Obviously, it would have to not interfere with the awning, but they haven't finalized the design for that. So that and also lighting has not been addressed in the
When
scheme.
they come back,
so-
they will bring that to us.
Yeah, that would be the
That
plan.
was my next thing, is the lighting you mentioned.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have a question.
Hold on,
Oh,
it's
okay.
Alan. Go ahead.
Just in terms of the procedure for voting, if you're to follow the sort of practice that the Design Review Board has, you really have sort of 3 or 4 options. On one case, you could approve the project with conditions, in which case you're deferring to staff to resolve the details as you would sort of condition them. You could vote to return the project for redesign, in which case you're saying you'd like to bring the entire project back. And then a practice that the Design Review Board doesn't use very often is that they simply continue the case because they need more information that's not present. So potentially this is a case where you're saying there are certain questions that are still there that you need more information about, and that's missing in the application for you to make a full determination. So that might be an option for you. And then, of course, the other option that you would have is to simply deny the project outright, although from what I'm hearing, I don't think you're headed in that direction.
You don't know.
All right.
This commission's all about suspense.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Chair,
Hold on.
go ahead, Mr.
Arlene.
I have a question for the other commissioners, because I've been looking at that too and asking myself, is it the way the colors are laid out? Because that center piece that's extremely rectangular, that is in bright yellow and deep green, does stand out, but is it that, or is it the design itself? Because when I envision that particular element being in a more muted color scheme, like the other color scheme, then it looks more palatable to me. So I guess, is it the colors or is it the design itself?
I believe each one of us have to say their comments, and then we go and vote, because...
Okay, well, maybe then it's just a rhetorical question.
Mr. Chair, now, if we give an approval right now, is there a final approval, going back to Mr. Loomis's
Well,
comment?
let's see how we want to approve it. The project is ready to go. We have very little things that we are asking for them to bring it back. I wouldn't want to delay anything, as far as I am concerned. So I think it's an approved project. Bring back some elements that we are not sure about.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
As long as we
How about the-
specify those elements.
Yeah, which are the pavement that you are concerned and other commissioners are concerned, which is the retractable canvas that you are concerned. What else?
That was it.
So they will come up with
In the
different...
box office, I believe.
And the box office.
Tying in the box office.
Yeah, yeah. So these are 3 issues that we want to see. Is there anything else, Arlene?
No, I think the risers were considered a minor aspect.
They can't exceed more than 7 inches.
No, that's the law.
Not
Okay.
the size, the
Also,
design.
the lights and the heaters would come to you.
The
You
lights
haven't
and
had
the
a chance to
heaters,
review
right.
those. The idea is most of these things are things that will be attached to the structure, so it's with your approval, they would be able to proceed, on their schedule. And the most important thing would be to get the paving design quickly, but hopefully at the same time get everything else.
Yes. Okay. If we are ready, we close this, and I am asking for a motion, whatever that motion is.
I'll make a motion to approve it with the conditions and let them proceed forward, and we'll see the other information.
Okay?
I second it.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chair Amirian.
Yes. Good project.
Yes. Very good.
If I may, just to interject again,
Oh, yes.
Chair Mirian, approve with conditions suggests that these remaining details that you have will be resolved at a staff level.
Yes.
So we are not bringing the project back to you for further approval. We can certainly bring it back for an update, but approve with conditions applies that the applicant's going to work with staff to resolve those issues.
Okay, now hold on a second.
That's my clarification, Mr. Chair.
So you may want to recount the vote or sort of make a new motion.
We can modify the...
Sorry I didn't interject before you're taking a vote, but
Yeah,
you
but
sort of
there
jumped
are
into it.
issues that Commissioner wants to see.
It's my understanding that I'll re-agendize the sunshade and these other open items, but the approval will allow the designers to move forward with, construction drawings for the project pending some of these smaller details. Is that possible?
That's certainly possible. As I was saying, it may be that you want to vote to continue it, to see these additional details before you take a final vote. We could proceed as it is and simply bring it back to you as an informational item, but I think you're going to want to discuss it in further detail. Or the other option is perhaps to have voted return for redesign to see these additional details, but signal in a very strong way that the overall concept of the project you're in favor of. It's simply there are 3 or 4 small details that you need to see before you can make a final determination.
The Alex Theater is going dark on July 1st, and that's kind of set in stone at this point. So the goal would be to make sure that we have everything resolved, obviously, well before that, and we certainly could do that.
Let me ask Commissioners one by one. Would you be comfortable if the staff approves those few items that we just said? There are 5 of them or 4 of them? Just one by one.
I would like to see the design of the forecourt, the floor design, and have it be color correct and palette correct, and see the actual design.
Yeah, so the answer is no. You want to see it.
Right.
Mr. Marian?
I don't mind continuing it.
Okay. You?
Yeah, being new to this process, are we able to see it at a staff level with you and give input, yet not wait?
No, we have to see it as a body and with a public hearing.
I think
How about you, Mr.
I
Morgan?
agree with Commissioner Vidor.
Okay. I like to see it too. Then in that case, why don't we re-vote this again?
Okay,
And
new vote.
ask and say that we like the direction that it's going, bring back with the details resolved.
Is that any different, Mr. Chair, than continuing it?
Hold on just one second. Let's see what's going on over there.
Yeah.
We are hearing half of that,
If I,
Sidebar is legal.
actually, I think maybe Deputy Director Emil Tadavosian would like to speak on the sort of procedural aspects and what the Alex Theater Board
Okay,
needs.
Mr.
in the way
Satavosian
of
was
a-
dying to get on the phone.
Reopen the hearing,
Reopen.
Mr. Chair.
He just lost a little more hair.
No, go ahead.
You need to reopen the hearing.
Public hearing is opened.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, first of all, I appreciate your comments and the time you've given on this very important project. As you know, it is a great asset, and we value your input. Just a few sort of technical issues that we're working with the theater schedule to accommodate the closure time with this project. It's not that we haven't really pushed the designers, it's that the sort of the scope of the project has grown towards the better. So the initial time that we had allocated to design and bring before you and then proceed with construction documents has sort of been compressed. Having said that, the issue at hand is that we need, basically in a nutshell, your approval to go to the redevelopment agency to release the funds for us to proceed with the preparation of the construction documents and go out to bid. it's sort of not your concern, but it is our concern at the same time. But we value your input and what you want to see. What I was suggesting to Alan, is, Mr. Loomis, is that the specific components you have concerns with could be brought back to you because they really haven't been worked out and potentially are not part of this design presentation, specifically the heaters, the shading device, which still needs to be informed with input from building and safety in terms of the scope of how complicated or how simple it could be, along with the heater design. Specific to the floor patterns, we've heard that we can proceed with preparing the construction documents with the caveat that the ultimate design will be blessed by you. I'm not sure what the technical sort of who gets to vote on what portion, but potentially those components could be separated from what you give us today, and we come back with those specific items, but the overall design, if we have your blessings, then we can proceed with the project.
Yeah, Mr. Tadeusian, I think we did exactly that.
We did.
But those specific items potentially could be removed from this design presentation and be brought forth for you later, if that's a possibility. Not necessarily a condition, because potentially you're leaving it up to staff to decide, but if they're removed from this design presentation, those specific items, we can bring those items
So
back.
you could vote very specifically. We could lay out the items that you're voting on, including the construction of the repaving of the forecourt, the construction of the seat walls and the planters, the plantings, and then we'll pull out any discussion of the decorative paving, the sunshades, the lights, and the heaters, and then we'll agendize that as a new item that will amend, your previous approval of the forecourt design, if that's what you.
Okay.
It was more like
to
a
do.
preliminary approval.
Yeah, in this case, I'd
See it that
probably,
way, yeah.
I might recommend the new motion be approvals with the condition that the following items need to be brought back for further discussion in front of the commission. That's a little bit of a clunky way of doing it, but I think it accomplishes the goal that's you seem to be trying to accomplish.
Yes. Okay. So can you reword that?
You will be making a motion to approve the project with the condition that the details of the sunshade, the paving pattern, the heating fixtures, and any lighting fixtures will return to the commission for further review.
That was Mr. Mardian's.
I'm sorry. I keep forgetting about the shape of the box office.
Okay, that was Mr. Mardian moves, and that is his wording. Do we have a second for that?
I second.
Okay. Roll call again, please. Hold on.
If you had closed the public hearing portion, I can take care of the box office issue for you immediately, so that
great.
doesn't
No.
come back.
With the chair's approval?
Let it come back. It's not a big deal. Let it come back.
This is not curved.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look.
Existing?
I wasn't sure.
Okay. So we have a motion. We have a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire, Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chair Amirian.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And sorry about the confusion. It's your fault bringing difficult projects.
That was the good trail run for all the new commissioners.
What's that? Yes, we are going to take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, actually, Alan Loomis has just raised a question. You'll also need to vote to rescind your initial vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Who would
Ida,
like
could you
to
take roll, make a motion to rescind the first vote?
I make a motion to rescind the initial vote.
I second that motion.
Okay. Do we need to have a roll call for that?
Yeah.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chair Amirian.
Yes.
It doesn't get much more official than that, so.
Possibly more ridiculous. Okay. Yeah, we have a 5-minute break.
Okay. Are we still live?
No. Yes, the microphones
The
are on.
microphones are always hot.
Okay, Jason, I'm gonna do a presentation for this one first, and then I'll introduce you.
Can I just leave this up there?
Thank
Of
you.
course, yeah. Genevieve? Hello. Admitting it? Is it warmer in here than the other part, or just bad?
see the recent.
There. So you can still place your bets.
Okay, we are on now, huh?
Yes.
All right, now we are going to go to item 7B, 850 Cumberland Road.
The Lombardi House at 850 Cumberland Road is on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and it was designated for the association it has with several notable residents of Glendale. So it's specifically not designated in 2006 for its architecture, but at the time it was considered a good example of the Spanish colonial revival style. It was built in 1929. And it was identified in the Cumberland Heights survey, which predated the kind of historic districting that's going on today, as an individual, as a property that was eligible for as a contributing structure in the historic district, but not for individual listing. So it was only after the applicants came back with further research that told the city about the importance of the people associated with it. Mrs. and Mr. Lombardi were very active in civic affairs for many, many years. And also the builder Royal Kent lived in the house for several years, and he did a tremendous amount of building and development in the city. This is just kind of a preface for your consideration of two proposals that are going to make alterations to the exterior of the building. In both cases, these are alterations that could not be approved at staff level. One of them perhaps could have been, but one of them definitely violates the Secretary of the Interior standards, which we're using as our guidelines for assessment of the appropriateness of work on our individual designations. I'll just run you through the two projects. Here's a picture of the Lombardi House from the street. It's at the corner of Cumberland and Ben Lomond on the southeast corner. And here's the map showing you where it is. This is looking toward the side of the property, away from the subject area, so you can see a large part of it is screened off with this garden wall. The first portion of the project is your consideration of the relocation of the door at the second floor balcony that you see here. So you can see the turquoise painted French door. What's really interesting, and I hope you all had a chance to get inside and look at this, is that this door opens off of a closet off the master bedroom. So it's a very unusual configuration. It kind of keeps people from using what looks like a very inviting, very pleasant balcony space. So the applicants, the new owners of the house, have asked that this door be relocated to the location you see here at the narrow end of the balcony. You can see in this rendering. And what would happen is that the existing door, or a door manufacturer, or a door milled to match all of its details, would be inserted in a new opening at the end of the balcony, and then a new steel casement window would be installed at within the old door opening, and then that opening would be infilled with stucco to match the existing stucco on the house. And you can see this house has all of its original steel casement windows throughout, and what this would do is kind of replicate the look of the two existing windows at the balcony. What's wonderful about steel casements is that the companies that make them today are using the same dies as the companies that made them 100 years ago, 80 years ago, and the potential for matching the existing is there in a way it isn't with certain other materials. So you can see here the location where the new opening would go. Oh, that's jumping ahead. I noted in the staff comments where we're recommending that you approve this portion of the project because I find that it meets the Secretary's standards. There was a question about the extent of stucco that was going to be removed during the process of this. I had a chance after the staff report went out to talk to the stucco contractor, who assured me that he would be able to match the texture, the existing texture and kind of variations in the stucco very closely without the original proposal, which called for, I'll use the mouse, basically to bring the stucco by sandblasting back down to its brown coat finish for the entire width of this balcony wall. And to my mind, that was a little excessive. I understand why the applicants wanted to do that, because there's the difficulty of patching in kind of new stucco into old sometimes raises problems. I'm not sure that the owners have agreed to do this yet, but based on my discussion with the stucco contractor, who has pretty solid historic credentials in terms of the work that he's done. He felt that he could patch it in just at the doorway opening without the extent of removing all of that stucco. So our recommendation would be to approve the project with the condition, or perhaps we won't call it that, but with the caveat that the stucco not be removed from the full balcony area. The second part of the proposal raises more concerns with regard to the Secretary of the Interior standards. This is the back facade, and you can see the arch-headed window is a stained glass window. I should note that it's not visible from the street. You can only see it when you walk up the driveway and look over the driveway gate. But the thing to be concerned about here is not only is this building on the Glendale Register, and the Commission does have full purview over the entire exterior envelope of the building, as well as the entire parcel as on its exterior portions, but it's also a Mills Act property. And when we consider alterations on Mills Act properties, given the fact that the owners are receiving a substantial property tax reduction for being enrolled in this program, we expect these properties to be held at the highest level of preservation. So there was a question about this stained glass window, which is on the stair landing as you're going up to the second floor, and has kind of a framing device of kind of a wisteria vine draping over the top of the arch. The current owners are working with a design team that came up with another idea. So I believe this is a situation where the owners didn't like this window as much as they liked the potential for a different window, and they're asking the Commission if they can take this window out and insert a new window. Here are two other details of this area, and if you look at the picture on the bottom right, you can see there's a little butterfly that pretty much everyone who's looked at this, and the owners retained two historic stained glass consultants to confer on this. They worked with R.D. Gibbs, who are based in Glendale, and also with the Judson Studio, based in Highland Park. There was a little bit of conflicting testimony from the two firms. I did a little research, and I'm pretty much comfortable with the fact that this window appears to be original to the house. The Judson Company felt that it was. And this is the proposal to put in these kind of round, clear panes, which has precedent on Spanish colonial houses, definitely, but we think that it's not appropriate, not because the design is poor, but because it would be removing a piece of historic fabric that we think is original to the house. Based on some of the questions raised by the consultants, one Gibbs Company felt that this design wasn't reflective of the 1929 period of construction, and they thought it was something that might date to the 30s or 40s. Looking at some of the designs that came out of the Tiffany studio, the top left and the center drawings are Tiffany windows, and the window on the right is a reproduction of a Tiffany window. I just was searching around to see if this kind of wisteria motif was typical of this era. These Tiffany windows are actually earlier, so it was definitely something that was in play as a design motif. And looking at this existing window, it certainly seems in keeping with stained glass windows of the period. Everyone seems to question, however, the butterfly, whether it was painted on or applied later. There's something about it. I've seen this in person, and it jumped out at me as not being of the character of the rest of the window in terms of the way it's shaded, and you can see the way the wisteria and the leaves are drawn. That's actually painted glass rather than stained glass or integrally colored glass. My recommendation is that the Commission not approve the replacement of this window because the property is under the Mills Act and because it appears to be original to the house, but that this butterfly could either be scraped off or removed without really harming the integrity of the design and the overall look. The owners have a design team working on the project, and they would like to make a presentation to you if you don't have any questions for me. Jason Summers from Finton Construction is here, as well as a representative from Michael Berman Limited Design.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Any questions from Jay?
No, we get to ask questions after this.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Let me know if you need any slides or anything.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jason Summers from Pacific Crest and Finton Construction. I'd like to thank the Glendale Planning Department for their very in-depth review of this proposal. Planning staff concurs with our request for the balcony door removal and adjacent replacement, along with the installation of matching window to complete the Spanish colonial symmetrical tradition. In regards to the stained glass window above the stairs facing towards the courtyard, replaced with this traditional Spanish colonial era design found on pages 10 and 11 of your package and also shown here on this slide. The existing window, which we had reviewed by two stained glass consultants, Mark Levy of Judson Design Studios said that the window is in disrepair. If we were to take it out, we would not be able to salvage it. It would most likely crack. And that is another reason why the client would like to replace the window, because of the disrepair and the rot that is going on around it. It's not just to replace it with a more desired design by the owner. Additionally, R.D. Gibbs, the other stained glass consultant who's been around for over 110 years, believes that the design is incompatible with the architectural style of the house. We are proposing an antique window design motif that's very indicative of the Spanish colonial era and will be a seamless replacement to the deteriorating stained glass window that is currently in place. Thank you for your short bit of time, and if there's any other questions regarding that stained glass window, since we seem to be in concurrence at least with the staff report on the door, Genevieve Truesdale is also here from Michael Berman Limited to answer any questions. That's the end of our short presentation.
Okay. Genevieve, are you going to make a presentation, or you are here only for answering the questions?
I'm here to answer questions.
Okay. We have lots of questions. Where would you like to start?
I have a question on the balcony itself and the door replacement. When I went into the house is basically, the interior has been gutted, per se. When they decided to gut the house, did they decide what they were going to do with the door itself? I mean, couldn't they have worked around and kept the door where it was? Originally, staff said that the door was, you had to go through a closet to get to the door, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a closet there anymore. So is there a real reason why the door has to be replaced? I mean, if it's no longer in a closet to get to it, but it actually can just get directly to it from the bedroom, from the master bedroom, there doesn't seem to be a reason for it to be replaced.
Right. The area is actually an alcove. If you take the doors off, which is how it is now, probably you saw it that way. Mm-hmm. But it has doors on it originally. They took all the doors off whenever they did the renovation.
So it's going to be a closet again then?
No, it will be open, but we're planning to put a piece of furniture in that alcove to enlarge the master bedroom.
So what they're doing is they're going to be where the door is now, there'll actually be a piece of furniture there. So that's the real reason for putting the door on the side then?
Correct.
Not that it was part of the closet. So that reason really isn't the reason why they're changing it anymore.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. How about you? Any questions?
I was just curious, if you're wanting to move the door, must you put in the new window there? Is that a request of the owner, or just something you thought would make the elevation look better if the changes happen?
Yes, I thought it'd be nice to have a good rhythm of 3 windows in the facade. And relocating the door just adjacent to it makes it less noticeable, I guess you could say, the entrance. And it's much more pleasing to look at a rhythm of 3 windows than 2 and then a door. It just looks kind of not symmetrical.
Okay. These questions.
I have a question, actually. I will follow Mr. Commissioner Morgan's. When I was there on the field, at the beginning I didn't have an issue with the door location, but when I was there I observed that this particular location of the door, it was an alcove before, because I could tell from the old framing members. Mr. Amirian, I think you observed that same thing when we saw each other there. I don't think the opening or the closet was there from the original. That was my observation, due to the fact of the framing lumber. My other question is on the window. Based on the testimony of those 2 consultants of the window, we have 2 conflicting issues, right, Mr. J? One recommends
Whether it's original or not.
One is, but my main question is actually, is this window repairable?
In my opinion, since stained glass goes back hundreds and hundreds of years to the medieval period, windows are inherently repairable. It's hard for me to believe that with the right investment that this window couldn't be repaired. In general, stained glass can be repaired in situ in certain situations where you don't have to remove it from the frame, or when you have to remove it from the frame, in many cases it can be re-leaded, reassembled, new support bars can be installed, and then and the wood condition, I can't say whether the wood has rotted or not. It doesn't look terribly rotted from the exterior, but I can't say. But certainly that could be repaired while the window is out. I've never, and I'm sure the consultant did say that it would be a project to take it out, but I can't imagine that someone who's in the business of repairing stained glass would say you should never take out a stained glass window. So.
Okay, the question should be directed to her.
I'm sorry.
We'll ask Jay later on after she sits. Okay. Are you done?
You're watching everything, aren't you?
Yes. You have to make it in a...
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Oh, that's all, Mr.
Right.
Chair.
So I have a comment about the door as well, and it kind of ties in a little bit to the comments of Commissioners Morgan and Shire. I think, first of all, I wondered why the door was being replaced. It seemed like a lot to do compared to replacing the window. Certainly seemed like a lot to do, but so be it. You want to do that, fine, do it. But you are cramming a very large door into a rather small corner, and the presence of a very large window there creates a very strange sense for a Spanish colonial revival house. I mean, normally we're trying to replicate adobe. It's a stucco house. It's kind of got an adobe feel to it. Walls are important, and why you wouldn't want to put a gigantic window up against the door so that in that perpendicular corner you have a large window and a door just doesn't seem right. It seems like either forego the window entirely or put a small, if it's a closet, I don't know what that space is behind the walls, but possibly a smaller, more ornamental, small, like you see in a lot of Spanish houses, window, but having all of this detail here at a converging three-dimensional corner just somehow seems really out of balance to me. So I would say forego the window if you have to move the door and just put the door in. I think that the stained glass can probably be repaired. If the frame is rotted, maybe the frame has to somehow be repaired as well. But my feeling based on the evidence that has been provided is that the stained glass should be conserved as is. So that's my opinion at this point on both projects.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Okay. It's my turn now. I agree with whatever everybody says. But if there is any architectural reason, I would agree with the door. But there isn't. So I don't have any question, but I will elaborate on that when we deliberate. Okay? Thank you very much. Any other questions from her? No? Okay, thank you. I like to say that I would agree if there is any difficulty in design that we are forced to change a door. I went upstairs and this area will become for a nice seat. It's off the bedroom. You would put a couch over there. And that is not a strong reason for me. That's one thing. The second thing is this picture doesn't do justice. If you stand downstairs, that wall, the wall on the left where we are proposing a new door, that wall at the bottom has a window, and at the top, the stucco wall goes. Yes, I'm talking about this wall that we cannot see at this time.
It's on the
Yes, it goes and hits the balcony wall at the end. That creates a very, very nice composition. Mm-hmm. When you put the door over there, that composition is totally ruined. And also, by changing the door and putting a window over there instead of the door, those 3 windows also destroyed the composition of that wall. It just, there is a rhythm there, small ones and an accent, an end thing. So really the design of this thing is very, very poor. And the justification for it is very weak. So I agree with the staff's report in half, and I disagree in the other half. I would personally reject the project, and I would ask the council not to nominate this for. Well, it is not going to the
we're just
council.
reviewing work on a designated
Yes,
property.
okay. As far as the stained glass, as Jay mentioned, stained glass has been done, God knows for how long, and to me it didn't look that bad. It can be repaired and repair it well. This new circular type of thing, it will not go there. This is a historic house. We approved it with that window, and we like that window to be refurbished. And also, there is a lot of money spent on this house, and the city is giving back a lot of tax money, and a portion of it should be spent in correcting the stained glass. And that would be my recommendation.
Before we deliberate, Mr. Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you brought an interesting point, and Commissioner Morgan also briefly touched on it. You're gutting this house quite a bit. I know there's a permit for the interior work, but is there an engineer involved in this particular instance?
Not in anything I reviewed, but I wouldn't review structural drawings. Building and safety would look at those.
Because I briefly looked at the plans. I don't remember seeing major structural drawings, and I feel we should look at that too because of integrity. Because Mr. Amir also leads me to another question: this is a bearing wall, and now we're removing the integrity of that bearing wall by putting this opening on that. And
You're talking about the balcony opening?
Balcony opening. I feel even if the commission goes in different direction and approves this door, I still want to see some structural,
I hope we don't.
With structural issues, none of us are, well, some of us may be equipped professionally, but the purview of the commission doesn't extend to any kind of structural or engineering review. We have to defer to our colleagues at Building and Safety for those things.
But I just want to make sure that Building and Safety is doing
We
that.
could certainly call their attention to any areas of concern if you were to approve the door.
Because the reason I'm saying there's no plywood sheeting on there, I'm sorry, Kai, but if we allow this opening, even though how well the stucco is blended in, then you might have some cracks eventually.
But let's see if we are doing.
Okay.
Yes, Alan.
As Joe was saying, this is much like in design review, where design review would be the first step. Once you have a design review approval, then it goes to building and safety, and on occasion there are issues discovered in building and safety that make a design approved by the design review board, or in this case HPC, not possible. So if building and safety found there was a shear wall, even though they have approval from HPC for that door, building and safety may not allow them to do it in any event.
Okay.
So they would have to go to building and safety after whatever
have to get
decision
a
is
permit.
rendered by HPC.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes.
They have to get
Yeah, the
a permit.
visit to HPC is the first step, and then applying for a permit.
Okay. May I have a motion for this, please?
reply to
We're in,
Commission's
Yes, of course you may reply.
Mr. Chair, I thought we were asking a question, not deliberating. Are we deliberating?
You were
just did.
deliberating.
We did, yeah.
Okay, all right, I didn't
Yeah, well,
hear that public hearing was, okay.
open now again. Go ahead.
First, I'd like to bring up on the stained glass window, we hadn't spoken about the removal of the butterfly on there and wanted to make sure that the commission spoke about the removal of that portion of the project, which there's been concurrence from the staff and the stained glass people that that is not part of the original design. Number two, with the front facade and the 3 windows and the moving of the door is in a place where it really disturbs the flow of the house as you come up the stairs onto that balcony before you go outside, and it'll be a much more usable element for the house if it is moved to the other side, and we've taken into account the Spanish colonial design aspects where we're trying to make it symmetrical on the front, and believe that it's not it's going to have the same finishing on the stucco that's currently existing there. So I don't think that it takes away from the integrity of the architectural elements from this house, which is also brings up the point this house wasn't put on the Glendale Historic list because of its architectural splendor. It was because of mainly the people that live there. So I think we're not taking away from the great design, but it definitely helps out the flow of the house and is something that we would definitely like the commission to try and work with us to approve.
If I can just correct two things that were said. I'm sure the commission knows this, but the Spanish colonial revival style is well noted for its asymmetry, not its symmetry, so that's kind of not an issue here. And then also in terms of what was your last point? I'm sorry.
You had said at the beginning this house was put on your list.
Criterion
Right. Oh, of course, yeah.
Not for its architectural.
Any property that's listed on the Glendale Register for whatever reason is associated with the city's history. Therefore, the building as it stands reflects the lives of the people who live there who would recognize it if they were to come back to life today and see it. And those things are still important. I just wanted it to be clear how this house got designated so that it could inform your thinking. But any Mills Act property and any Glendale Register property, we look at the full building envelope for the architectural integrity.
Well, then with the asymmetry, if there's a way that we could continue to move the door and leave it as a blank stucco wall, that would also work for us.
We are not going to give you a design direction. The tendency of the commission is that it's not an appropriate design, so we cannot discuss any further, really. You can come back with another solution, but we cannot design it for you.
We're not asking for you to design it. It's more for the approval of the replacement of the door, but not for the installation of the new window.
I believe the commission, if the commission was inclined to approve the door but not the window, that is something you could...
Changing the location of the door, you mean?
And then infilling the former door opening without putting in a new window is one of the options you could consider.
That didn't come to us as a subject of discussion. That needs thinking and deliberation. Okay. I cannot sit over here and design things, whether the door here will be better or not better. I just can't do that. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, the hearing is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, this window...
Is that what you were referring to, the window that's going to be next to the door?
Yeah, the window that would
stained
infill.
glass window.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
No, but when you just commented to this gentleman, you were referring to...
I was referring to the new steel window.
Yeah, I understood. Okay, may I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to deny the request of the alteration. And if they do need to change the window, can I say a few things? Replace it in kind, if they can't fix it.
In the back window?
In the back window.
Okay.
If they can't repair it, they have to replace it in kind.
And the front?
The front, I'm against moving that.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
What about the butterfly?
You can't ask that right now.
Okay.
We'll get clarification.
We have a motion, we have a second. Would you please have a roll call?
Commissioner Mardian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor?
Yes.
And Chair Amirian?
Yes.
And did the commission's vote, would that allow for the removal of the butterfly?
The recommendation is that it is put over there. You can do that. That's
You want
for me,
to
it's okay.
make a motion?
We can make a motion and...
I make a motion that the butterfly can be removed if so desired by the occupant of the house.
I second.
Okay, roll call please on that as well.
Commissioner Mardian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor?
Yes.
And Chair Amirian?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody wants to take a break?
Let's go to the next one.
Okay. 7C, 1124 Viscano Drive.
7C as a Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for a home in the Ross Moyne neighborhood. And our planner, Milka Toledo, is going to give you the staff presentation.
All right.
Hello. I am the case planner for this project located at 1124 Viscano Drive. It is a one-story single-family residence. It was built in 1925 by the developer Martin Nielsen from the firm Nielsen Brothers. Though no architect has been identified for the project, it is likely that the Nielsen Brothers used as an in-house designer, perhaps Mr. Nielsen himself. It is an interesting variant of the Tudor Revival style. It is located on the east side of Viscano Drive between Mountain Street and Ethel. It is actually located in the built Ross Moyne tract and is one of the earlier homes that rose from this area's citrus groves. The first occupants were Sherman G. and Lenore Euler, who purchased the property in 1926. The house remained in the Euler family until 1997 and retains many of its original features as documented in the historic photographs that were in your packet. The applicant did a plethora of research on this project and included many detailed information about the Eulers' career as it relates to their contribution to the LA Unified School District, as well as notable military experience. However, none of this information suggests that any of the Eulers or any subsequent persons associated with the property played a role in history or development in the Glendale or the region. As far as the architectural style, as noted on the slide before us, the unusual example of Tudor Revival style that was once popular in Glendale throughout the 1920s and 30s is what's most notable on this project, with some variations. It is much simpler in its overall form and use of materials than most typical homes of this style. The roof is particularly at odds with traditional manifestations of style. Most of the house is covered with an atypical hipped roof, which is somewhat steeply pitched, but not as much as an unusual form of Tudor revivals. Another roof with a very steep pitch is located on the north side of the facade above the front porch, and this is somewhat of a character-defining feature for this particular house. This is one of the more reflective of the Tudor style, with a fully exposed half-timbered gable facing north away from the street, and a small area of exposed gable at the south side, also with half-timbering visible above the main roof. Another detail from this house, as we can see, is the front porch, noted with the somewhat sculptured treatment of that wood post on the corner supporting the roof. It's a heavy wood post at the front porch, and it's an interest because of its treatment. Another item would be the windows, the front and some of the side windows, which have clipped upper corners, an unusual feature for a house of any style. And almost all the windows have this feature, except some windows, or the casement windows, towards the rear and at the rear of the house. Overall, the house retains a great deal of its historic integrity. As we can see here at the rear of the house, it doesn't have any major embellishments at all. The rear facade, it's very simple. And the next slide. Sorry, Jay. Thank you. No problem. And alterations to the side porch and the chimney would include, as noted, the chimney was rebuilt, I believe it was after the 1994 earthquake, but it does appear to be very similar to the one seen in the original photos. And also we have changes that were made to the side porch. They have the facade and the trellis and the rail and the paving at the side porch, which again is on the same facade. However, they use the same stucco cladding to blend in with the existing. And as far as the eligibility for the property on the Glendale Register, I'll turn it over to Jay, and he will go over that information with you.
Okay, since we have several new commissioners today, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go through the 7 criteria for designation. The applicant did not nominate the house. We usually defer to applicants when they file a nomination. Sometimes they'll say it meets 5 of the criteria. We may think it meets 1 or 2 of those. In some cases, we think it might meet none of those. Despite this house being of architectural interest, because it's kind of an unusual variation on a style, we weren't really able to find that met any of the criteria. The applicant only nominated under 2 criteria, C and D, but I'll run you through all of them just so you get a sense of the types of reasons for listings on the Glendale Register. The first criterion, A, is that a property could identify interest or value as part of the heritage of the city. Many people nominate a house, and it's not in the case of this property. They'll say, oh, my house is indicative of the suburban development of the Glendale area or the Los Angeles region. What we're really looking for heritage of the city is something like the Casa Adobe, or something that's very critical to the deep history and the heritage of the city, rather than being reflective of kind of broader patterns. Criterion B is location of a significant historic event. That would be something like the former Oak of Peace, which is now the Stump of Peace, which had a very important meeting held under it. It's that level of historic event is something we're looking for. I'll talk about criterion C and D in more depth with relation to this property, but you can think of criterion C as the people criterion associated with important people to the history of the city. And criterion D is the most common criterion under which a property can be designated, and that's for the character of its architecture, and I'll come back to this one again. Criterion E is a property with a unique location or physical characteristic that's an established and familiar visual feature. When the Seeley's building was nominated, for example, because of its prominent location, it's kind of marking the entrance or the exit from Glendale, its great neon sign. That, among several other things, was one of the criteria that it met. We also had a house nominated up in Rossmoyne that's at the end of La Zanja, which is everyone in the neighborhood calls the Castle House, and it terminates a street so that anyone driving up that street, this castle with its big round form and crenellated rooftop, is kind of right there, and it's very, very notable. The Brockman Clock Tower also would be an example of something like this. Criterion F is the site has potential archaeological interest. This is very rarely employed and certainly wouldn't be in most of our kind of single-family neighborhoods. And finally, a property could contain a natural setting that strongly contributes to the well-being of the city. This would be more than someone's beautifully landscaped front yard or backyard. This would definitely be something more along the lines of Brand Park, or something kind of a cultural landscape perhaps, or an open space. Focusing on the 2 criteria under which 1124 Viscano was nominated, the nomination did a great job of letting us into the Euler family's life, and they had a fantastic collection of old photos, and it's really impressive how this house has changed so little over the years. You can really see the same house in those older photos as we see today. But as we kind of read through it, what we're really looking for when we invoke this criterion, and we will name a house after any of the people that might meet this criterion, we're looking for people who actually personally made changes in Glendale that affected a broader group of people, or people who may be of more regional or even national importance, who came to Glendale and spent time here and kind of brought either some sort of prestige through their presence in Glendale, or did things within Glendale. So an example of that would be the house of Ed Strangler Lewis, who not only was, the world-famous wrestler, but when he moved to Glendale in retirement, he opened up a restaurant, and he became kind of a very well-known local personage. He was kind of a character. People would come from out of town to come to his restaurant to kind of hang out with him. So that would be the sort of person that might qualify under this criterion. Criterion D is the most common one. Like I said, it's also the most complicated because it uses the word or. So we have 2 parts of this criterion that a house or a property could fall under. One is that it's the best remaining example of an architectural type in a neighborhood. Neighborhoods are defined by neighborhood services, so we have kind of a map of neighborhoods that we use when we look into this. It's very hard in a neighborhood like Rossmoyne to be the best Spanish or the best Tudor because we have so many really excellent examples of both styles in the area. So often the second part of this criterion is the one that's invoked, and this is the outstanding or exemplary architectural design, details, materials, or craftsmanship of a particular period. And this is the one that we analyzed the subject property under most closely. And even though it definitely has these elements of architectural interest and it's kind of a quirky take on one of the more traditional styles we have in Glendale, it was hard for us to see that level of craftsmanship or design on the house that when we think of what is a Glendale Register property, it's something that's set above, its peers in the neighborhood. It's something that tells us a different story than the other beautiful houses in the neighborhood. And under this criterion, we couldn't come to the conclusion that it met what we're looking for listing on the Glendale Register. It seems clear to me, though we haven't had a study done in the Rossmoyne neighborhood, that a house like this is a very likely contender to be a contributing structure in a potential historic district. And that's one of the things that separates contributing structures from individually designated buildings, is that there's something about it that sets it apart from kind of the neighbors around it. So at staff level, we couldn't recommend this house for listing or for the Mills Act application, and don't like doing that, but in this case felt it was what we had to do. But the owner, Susan Wolfson, who prepared the great nomination, is here to answer any questions or to explain to you why she thinks that it meets the criteria and should be nominated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please, come forward, Susan.
Good afternoon. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Am I
Yeah.
doing that? Okay. First of all, I want to thank Jay and Milka for all the courtesy and professionalism and time they spent. And I want to thank the commissioners for taking time and giving attention to my application. The reason I feel the house is worth registering or putting on the register is because I do think it's very unique. All of the things that were already mentioned, I want to be mindful of time and I don't want to repeat things. Jay mentioned the tipped windows and the arch, and not the arch, the post. But also I think that the entry is on the side like that instead of facing the street is interesting. It is atypical. I know it's atypical for Tudor revival, but I want to emphasize that it's a very modest home. That's why it's so simple. That's why there's not as much decorative features, especially on the rear. And it's, to my mind, exemplary of the middle-class aspirations and lifestyle of that period. Also, I just want to say that the builder, Martin Nelson, he was a Swedish immigrant, a very self-made man. He was not a trained architect, but I believe that he probably designed a lot of the houses that he built. And therefore, some of the atypical features probably relate to his, taking a little bit of license. He was very mindful of, I think, the layout on the site and the use of the windows and the placement of everything to maximize the light that would come into the house, and that's a piece of what's going on there. That's probably why also the cladding is simple stucco cladding instead of, it's all proportional to the size of the house. It's a small house. Anyhow, that's why I feel the way I do about it. I'm extremely sentimental, of course, about it, and so I'm not objective as you all are, and as the city is, as the staff is. And I'm also not a professionally trained preservationist or anything like that. I'm simply, I am very interested in it, though, and I have done a lot of reading, and it's been a lifelong interest. So I think that's probably all I can say to you, and I again thank you for your time.
Hold on just one second. Is there anybody who likes to ask questions from her?
Not at this time.
No? Thank you.
Sir.
I have another card, Mr. Tyson.
Good afternoon again. I'm Larry Tyson. I'm still a landscape architect. I haven't retracted my license yet. I am also a neighborhood of this residence. I live at 312 East Mountain Street. I had the unique or the privilege to know one of the Nelson brothers' sons who carried on the building tradition of the Nelson brothers. And I think this is an important aspect of this particular house in that the Nelson brothers were well-known builders in Glendale who, along with Greg's Artistic Homes, greatly influenced the way this neighborhood looks in establishing the character of neighborhoods in Glendale and throughout Southern California. My take on this house is the uniqueness of it is that this is their Scandinavian interpretation of California Tudor eclectic. The style being the sculptured post, the unique roof. I've never seen a roof like this on a Tudor house, and I think that makes this unique. The massing of the windows, the 45-degree clipped windows, which are also reflected in the detailing inside and the fireplace. I think the unique character of this house comes because this house was not architecturally designed. This was not a purist style of Tudor architecture, but as I said, could be viewed as a unique local Glendale variant of Tudor. This, I think, makes this house worthy of historical preservation, and that is an important regional variant unique to its time and place that should be preserved for future generations to reference architectural evolution in Southern California. And that's what all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Any questions
I have
from
a
Mr.
question to Mr. Tyson. You said Greg Artistic Home?
Well, no, I'm just comparing. They were contemporaries of Nelson.
Yeah, okay.
And Greg's Artistic Homes were contemporaries building homes at the same time period.
Okay.
But this was built...
no relation.
No relation.
No relation.
They were competitors, let's put it that way.
All right. Thank you.
Now, but before we continue, there's something that Mr. Loomis just reminded me of that I forgot to mention at the beginning of the hearing, and this affects Commissioner Shire. We got a read from the City Attorney's Office that because Commissioner Shire resides within the 500-foot radius of this property, and we do a public noticing of the area to announce the commission hearing, that she should recuse herself from voting on this. And the commission will just have 4 members voting for the property today.
Does she have any choice?
She has no choice.
All right.
It's coming straight from the city.
300. I thought it was 300, not 500.
We're erring on the side of 500 because we changed all of our other ordinances to 500 except for this one. So.
You are lucky.
Can I sit down?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Anybody would like to start the comment?
Not
period?
anybody. Almost anybody.
Yeah, well, commissioners, yes. Who would like to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank Susan Wolfson for coming forward. One thing I have to say about Susan, because I know she does volunteer work for the Glendale Historical Society, and she's very interested in the historic fabric of Glendale, is that, obviously after seeing her house and looking at the application, she's really a wonderful steward for a period home in Glendale, and especially after what we just witnessed a few minutes ago. It's delightful to have somebody come before the commission who really genuinely cares about preserving the historic fabric of the city. I looked at it and tried to think of various ways, but I think my opinion is that I have to agree with the staff's assessment that the house does not rise to the level of a landmark, but looking at it in the context of your street and the small Tudor cottages on the street and the amazing continuity of your street, which I know is a part of the Ross Moyne area, I certainly have to agree that it would make, I'm sure it would be a contributing structure and certainly is a contributor to the historic fabric of the neighborhood and its story. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chair, before... Can I ask staff? I'm sorry, a question?
Question period is passed, but you can. Exception. Okay,
All right.
go ahead. Ask.
The Nelson brothers, based on what has been submitted, is there enough research on the Nelson brothers?
Well, I think I left the caveat in the staff report that if further research was done on the Nelson brothers and then this house was analyzed in that broader context, so if we establish their importance, what I think is fairly clear, that they were major builders during this period and really did help shape the city, we we'd have to make a finding that this house somehow had some special character, or perhaps through research find out that there was some very interesting design input through the Scandinavian California Tudor Revival style or something like that. So I do think there's room for that if the applicant decided to kind of pursue more research, I guess. But in the application, there's a wonderful list of many of their properties that I look forward to kind of looking at them specifically, but the nomination doesn't have the information for that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Maria, while you are at it,
Well,
you make your comment.
the reason I say I'm getting close to Nelson, he used to be in my office building in 1955.
You have to recuse yourself.
I was going to say, is that a conflict of interest? I read the report, 416 North Glendale Avenue. I say, wow.
Do you have any comments?
No, I have a comment. I think the applicant has done a wonderful research. I'm overwhelmed on the history. But I agree with Commissioner Vidor that I don't think it reaches that level, although the entry that is very unique, but it doesn't have anything else but the entry. And I think we're looking at, when we designate homes, we're looking all around and more of craftsmanship. I don't see it reaching that level. And as far as criteria, see relationship, definitely I don't see the relationship with Euler. Because although they were had a lot of career, but it was outside Glendale. So that's why I'm saying maybe the applicant could do a little more research on the Nelson and relate Nelson to him. But again, I have to see it to determine that at a later stage. Mm-hmm. But at this time, I don't want to support this application. I thank you for your history. It's wonderful work you've done. It doesn't reach there. And I hate to see anybody touching this building, and I'm hoping soon the Rossmoen will come through and this will be a contributor like Jay says. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to agree with Commissioner Mardian. It's the application that has so much heart, and I want to honor the Oilers, especially Sherman Eugene Euler, who lost his life during World War II. I mean, that to me is what Glendale has always been about, people giving and not asking back. I rode my bicycle past this house many times, and it's a great little house, like a lot of houses in Glendale, but it doesn't rise to what I think that we should be putting there. I mean, I like the house. I just don't feel that it meets any of the criteria that the staff has indicated at this moment, but I loved reading the report. I sat on my bed and read it, and I felt joy and happiness for the Oilers. I just wished, in many ways they contributed to the city of Glendale. I mean, I know that. But unfortunately, their service was also outside the city of Glendale, and I looked, hoping that I could find something that they did that would push it ahead. But unfortunately, I haven't found anything yet. But I do believe, as staff has said, if you went with the Nelson brothers and maybe we found more, it might be beneficial at that point. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I am prepared to support staff's report with sadness. I went and I visited the building twice, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, to just make sure that I would have the courage to deny it. It is so beautiful, so romantic. It's just like coming out from a book. But I agree with my colleagues. It just doesn't come to that level. So instead of saying more, I would just stop there and ask for a motion if there is no other comments or none. Okay. Who would like to make a motion on this?
Somebody wants to make the motion.
I'll make a motion. I don't have the way we read it. Do you have a copy of it?
It's
I concur with staff's recommendation.
yeah, that the historic preservation.
That this should not be designated as a local resource, and also the Mills Act.
Not.
Not to include the Mills Act also.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Okay.
We need a second.
Yes, we need a second.
Okay, I second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Mardian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
With sadness, yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chair Amirian.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, you are right.
We're sad about it.
You are right.
This was not an easy decision. I'd like to deny things that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's next?
And
Next.
Now, item number 8, Planning Division updates and informational briefings.
we have several updates and briefings for you. The first, I just wanted to announce to the commission, and we've been talking about doing this for several months now, but we haven't had a commission meeting for several months, and now we have a very changed commission. We've talked about the Mills Act program for the city and how the city approaches the Mills Act, what we request or ask from owners in Mills Act properties, and what we might be able to do as we move forward with new applicants coming in and new properties being brought into the program. One of the main concerns is that historically Glendale has given a lot through the Mills Act, through the property tax reduction, but hasn't really asked for that much. And in recent months, the Commission has been very specific in asking some of the applicants to install a new garage door or to make certain alterations that are contingent either upon their approval for the program or that we work into a time frame within the duration of the contract to make sure that those things happen. What I'd like to present to the Commission are just some ideas based on what some of the other local jurisdictions are doing so that you can hash out some ideas, talk about it, and see how we might be able to enhance the Mills Act program. One of the things that we haven't done historically is inspect the properties. And if we're not inspecting the properties regularly, we don't actually know that people are they're not violating their contract. So we'd like to do that. We'd also like to talk about ways that we might be able to do inspections or put more of the burden on the owners to perhaps be required to submit photographs of set areas of the house at regular intervals so that we don't have to actually physically go out to the house and certainly save some staff time that way. So all of these things will be presented in a report, in a format. I just wanted to introduce it today so that you guys could start thinking. I would recommend that you read Mills Act contracts, and I can make those available to you. I would recommend that you go to the state website because this is a state kind of administered program, and there's a lot of information that's downloadable there. All of this is on our website, so we have links for the Mills Act information on the planning website on the historic preservation page, which hopefully you all know how to access. If not, you can ask me and I'll help you. So that was basically, I just wanted to introduce the idea so you can start thinking about it so you can have a little bit in your head as we proceed with the discussion, which at this point we may not we may not agendize until March. Because Commissioner Shire won't be here at the February hearing, and we'd like to have everyone participate in the discussion. So if you could all keep that in mind and let me know if you have any advanced calendar issues. We'll try to make sure we have a full house for that. 8B is an update on our city policy for regulating paint colors on designated properties. And this was raised at, I believe, the August 2009 hearing by Commissioner Mardian, if I'm not mistaken. Commissioner Mirian, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And so we've prepared some information that you have in front of you that Manny Valenzuela put together about what other cities do. I wanted to start by introducing what we do currently and then kind of talk about the philosophical issue of that sort of regulation. So you should know, first of all, that in our historic districts, we do not regulate paint color, except in the situation where there would be a property that's going through a major alteration, a major addition, or new construction inside a historic district. The reason we don't do that is the design guidelines are silent about paint color almost completely. There's one exception to that. But the design review guidelines that affect citywide design review do specifically discuss color when there's new construction involved. And this body is bound as a design review authority to follow that. So if we had a situation where there was new construction, color would be something that you could currently comment on and, make a binding decision on. And that applies just to the historic districts. In terms of the Glendale Register properties, the Register specifically says in one of the provisions for minor maintenance, I think it's called maintenance and repair, that paint color is something that can be reviewed under the ordinance for Glendale Register properties. The practice of the city has been to never review color, as far as anyone here can remember. And because it's in the ordinance, it doesn't require it. It just gives the city the ability to do that. So as you consider the subject, I just wanted to enter kind of from my kind of historic preservation background and the experience I've had working with community groups and people in neighborhoods. One of my concerns about actually deciding to move forward with more intensive regulation of paint color, and primarily that's based on the fact that as we try to educate people about historic districts, the Glendale Register, one of the first things we hear very often is, "You're going to tell me what color to paint my house. You're going to tell me what color to paint my front door. This is overreaching. This is too much bureaucracy." It sets a tone of kind of this over-regulatory environment that puts people off from the concept of preservation in general. So that's one concern we have. And then the other issue is the reality of what do people really do with their properties in historic districts and in Glendale Register properties. And the issue there, it's like, as far as I know, we have never had one of our register properties painted purple or bright orange or an inappropriate color that we've ever had complaints about. At least in recent years, we haven't heard about anything. So I think there's a natural tendency in the neighborhoods for people to kind of paint things that are kind of keeping up with the Joneses but copacetic with the overall look of the neighborhood. The question is, does the regulation of color warrant the potential for someone to do this rather than the reality of what's happening out on the street? And I think that's something that you'll need to balance as you consider the issue. In my experience, paint colors are based on taste rather than historic accuracy, and every decade or three there's kind of a new palette that's used on historic properties in general. So we had Victorian houses in the 1890s and the 1900s that had 3 or 4 paint colors on them. In the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, those often went to white or beige, just monochromatic colors. In the 60s, Victorians became hip again and it started changing the color palette. During all of those times, people thought that their colors were appropriate to the historic character of the house, when the reality is it's more reflective of contemporary taste than it is of actual history. It's also a little bit hard to regulate paint in that paint, you don't need to pull a permit to get paint. And you don't need to pull a permit to do certain things that we do regulate on our historic properties, and that's where we have to be vigilant through education with owners, through neighborhood vigilance and making sure that bad things aren't happening. But with the paint color particularly, it seems like it would be kind of over a regulatory burden to start finding out who is putting paint on their house, and then for us to be telling them what colors are appropriate or aren't appropriate. So with that, kind of just as background for your consideration, Manny Valenzuela put together a chart that kind of looks at what some of the other local jurisdictions have done with paint colors.
If I may jump in and offer another complication that comes with looking at paint, and this occurs oftentimes with design review projects that have had a certain color approved as part of the design review approval, that the board is oftentimes making their decision about what color to paint a 3, 4-story, 2-story building, a fairly large building, based on a color sample that's 2 by 2 square and inside under fluorescent lights, and oftentimes that exact same paint color, the numbers may be exactly accurate, but of course when you put it on the wall and see it, oh my, well, I didn't think it was going to be so green or neon or whatever the case may be, and oftentimes there needs to be some adjustments. And anybody who's attempted to paint their kitchen or their dining room knows that they often have to experiment a little bit before they get it right.
And one additional thing about the design review ordinance, where you do have purview over painting for new construction, that's only good for 5 years. So after 5 years, any color could be slapped up, and the city couldn't say anything about that. Okay, Manny.
Oh, okay. Good evening, members of the Commission. Manuel Valenzuela, planning staff. Before you is a hopefully a simple chart of what some of our local cities are doing that have historic preservation ordinances. For example, Long Beach, LA, West Hollywood, in their municipal code, it actually does say they can regulate paint colors, whereas cities like Pasadena, outside of their central business district, as well as South Pasadena, there is no mention of color. I do want to point out that in LA, as you can see, yes/no under color regulation for historic districts, it really does depend on their HPOZ boards. It's not a consistent standard to regulate color. And with that, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
I have a question. Is paint color understood to mean color of, if you were painting the concrete or if you were painting other things or whitewashing or dyeing things? Because I'm thinking about the project we looked at today, the Alex and the forecourt and coloration of the concrete. And does this apply to commercial and institutional buildings as well, or are we just talking about residences?
With the people that I talk to in these various cities, it's the exteriors and not necessarily, but in the context of the conversations, it wasn't necessarily whitewash, but more, what if they wanted to paint their building purple or something like that.
Very specific to that.
Right. And I do want to point out that it isn't necessarily very black and white, whereas Pasadena and South Pasadena.
Is that a joke?
But whereas Pasadena and South Pasadena said no, they don't regulate color. If there was a large project proposed, they would make recommendations for the colors. But if it was just painting the building, they wouldn't say anything. And likewise, with cities that do regulate color, they did indicate to me that there is a difference between a very small house and perhaps maybe one of their largest and best known historic properties. Then they'll step in. So it isn't necessarily very concrete yes and no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. 8C.
Okay, and this is something you can either ask to have agendized in the future if you wanted to discuss it and have public comment on it, or you can just take it under advisement and we'll continue with our current policy until we develop another plan. 8C, we just wanted to let you know that we have an exciting project coming up on one of our most prominent designated historic buildings at the Brand Library and Art Center. And this is a project that's being undertaken to fix some of the problems that have been plaguing librarians for decades now, in terms of the way the space is programmed, the way the space is laid out. And then also the building physically needs to be upgraded. It doesn't meet current seismic code, and it also has some very deficient systems problems with HVAC and other systems. So the city went into a bidding process to retain a consultant to come in to kind of look at these problems. And we were very excited that Grew & Associates, in partnership with Offenhauser McKeel Architects, were chosen by the Public Works Department in conjunction with the library staff and then planning staff. Alan and I have been a deep part of these meetings and will continue to be. The exciting thing is that Gruen has a great track record of making projects work on budget and on time. They haven't done so much historic work. Fran Offenhauser has done a tremendous amount of historic preservation architecture, including both of the libraries for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. There's one in Beverly Hills and one in Hollywood that were phenomenal adaptations of existing buildings. So everyone thinks that the team is the right team to go forward with this. And what we'll be able to do is give you occasional updates. At this point, we've only had a kickoff meeting, and Alan and I will be sitting with the design team next week, I believe, tomorrow. Yeah, so soon. And they're meeting with different constituent groups within the city and the library system to make sure that they understand all of our concerns, and then they're going to bring this all together. There will definitely be public outreach so that stakeholders in the library and the Arts Center are going to be heard from, and that's going to be built into the process. The historical societies are going to be reached out to. So we think this is going to be, an exciting process. We are hopeful that the project is going to really make the library much more workable than it is, while also obviously respecting all of its historic character. And it seems very doable. So we just wanted to let you know about that. You'll be hearing more about it in the future. And if you don't have any questions on that?
No, I don't.
Finally, if you remember way back when, we had a hearing where we had several residents from the Good House, not the Good House itself, but from the apartment complex that was built around the Good House, come here, and there was concern about termite infestation in both the historic Good House as well as kind of the newer building that was built. The update is that even though that was months ago, the city is still in the bid process, so we're still bringing the bids in. But there is every expectation that, once those come in and a vendor selected, the problem's going to be taken care of. So that is your termite update. And that is it for the planning updates.
Mr. Chair, I had a question. Going back to A, is it proper for me to ask something about A?
Yes.
I mean, you said we're going to bring it back later. Are we talking about just the Mills Act or the minimum age?
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally forgot about that. Yes, we'll be talking about the Mills Act, and then also at a previous meeting, I think Commissioner Mardian brought up the idea of, what do we do? Do we have a minimum age for the properties that are nominated to the Glendale Register? Right now, we have a building from 1973 and 1974 on the register. There are various philosophies and beliefs about what an age should be. At the national level, it's a 50-year cutoff. A lot of cities use a 50-year cutoff, a 30-year cutoff. Some use a 25-year cutoff, and many do not have a minimum age, and that's the current situation in Glendale. So, in theory, a property built 5 years ago could be nominated to the register, and it would be up to you to decide whether enough time had elapsed for us to judge it. But what we'll do is I'll, in addition to the Mills Act, at the same time, we'll kind of have a separate item agendized to discuss the possibility of establishing a minimum age.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments from commissioners?
I have one comment. I think we discussed this in the past. We need to also discuss the roof material change. I think you recall that, Mr. J? For designated buildings. We were
I'm not
gonna
sure I
discuss
do.
that, and we were holding it up
Okay.
for...
Well, we can package this all together with the, we'll have 3 separate discussions. Depending on agendas, I might kind of move one from one way to the other. I think, though, at this point with the new commission, we definitely want to make sure we have the full group for each of those discussions. So look forward to March for the first round.
I'd like to make a suggestion regarding what just Mr. Mardian says regarding roof material, though it is kind of a subject that we have discussed earlier. But I would like to suggest something to see whether you would all agree or not. If we don't, that's okay. If we do, and that is the following. If a commissioner is asking for something to be agendized, do you want that suggestion to be only from one commissioner, or if there is more interest, more than one, then we bring it up? Because each one of us might have...
Sorry to interject, Chairman, but to answer your question, I might suggest you adopt the policy that the council has recently adopted. If I'm not mistaken, when one of the council members asks for something to be agendized, the practice is that at least a second council member needs to concur in order for that to come onto the agenda.
That's exactly what I was trying to
I support that. I think we need to...
Okay, so from now on we have a policy that if each one of us wants something to come for discussion or a study, then we have to have a second. Okay, that is done. And the other one is
and then we'll have to have you vote on what we just talked about. So
I keep forgetting that.
My understanding is the council doesn't then vote on everything they ask to come back. There just has to be 2 council members requesting an item for it to get onto a later agenda.
Uh-huh. So now we vote on that too?
No, we've heard from 2 of you.
No,
we're okay.
Okay. Now,
You approving with conditions, of course.
the other thing I wanted to just bring to attention to my colleagues. At certain times I will interrupt you. And the reason for that is we need to have an order for everybody to make it easier and kind of flowing it better. And one thing, when we have an applicant and it is question period, I think it would be respectful if we just question that applicant and he sits or she sits down before we deliberate. We separate our comments from our questions. It is very important. Then our comments will be when we are deliberating and whatnot. Questions is when we question, and if that is okay, let us.
I think that's appropriate.
Is that okay?
So you're saying that following the question period, we'll ask if the applicant has anything to say before you enter deliberations.
Yes.
Once we enter deliberations, we don't reopen it.
Right.
And you
Correct.
vote. So.
That's right. And when she's there, our deliberations or our comments, we hold it until we start deliberating. If that's acceptable, then that's fine. And then I don't have anything else to say.
I have nothing.
Would anybody like to suggest that we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
All right. Roll call.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor, and
Yes.
Chair Marian.
Now, yes, but what would happen if somebody says no? We start all over again?
The practice of the council is you simply need a second to adjourn. They don't take vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.